one of the guys who got moved from the 90-man roster to one of the reserve lists because he wasn't traded, Jonathan Taylor, went from the active physically unable to perform list, which caused him to count against the 90. Now he goes to the reserve PUP list, doesn't count against the 53, but by rule has to miss the first 4 games of the regular season. Even if they would trade him, he is on the PUP list, and he cannot play for anyone for the first 4 games. First 4 games, not first 4 weeks. Some teams have a bye in that window. First 4 games he must miss. And that was that for now. Now, they said Tuesday was the deadline, Chris. I don't believe it because they also said they weren't going to trade him at all. I think the window's still going to be open between now and Halloween when the window closes for good on trades in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, are we shocked that he didn't get traded in this time period? Absolutely not. I mean, come on. We know where the running back market is. We've exhausted this topic over the last few weeks. We're blue in the face. This should have been done forever ago. Teams, trying to trade for a running back who might be a little banged up, right? And then add him to the salary cap and a big new contract and all that. There's just that's too much for what we know the current state of the running back market. It's too risky. And on top of that, Mike, I know I texted you a little bit, but just from people I knew in the league, I don't think there was any real business in trying to acquire Jonathan Taylor. No real serious conversations, nothing that got down the road in compensation. I mean, the thing that I was told from different people was that Miami, and I know you wrote an article or two, and maybe you heard more and you can add to this, but, Miami was the only team that seemed interested. That's where I was led to believe. They were the only team that was kind of like, hey, what kind of money are you looking for? So not shocked by these developments. What I am and I don't know is where his health really is at. And that's what I don't – and I haven't really heard that for sure. Is it like one of those things that it's a real injury? Or, could he play if it's the right situation and, he's, being treated the right way again? I don't know that aspect, but I'm not surprised by yesterday's developments.
Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald pointed out at one point last week that the Bears and the Broncos reportedly were interested, but he didn't mention who was reporting it, and I never tracked that all the way down because, look, the Broncos wouldn't have signed him to a market-level deal.
Definitely not.
It's that same vibe that the Dolphins have been giving off. We're here if we can steal the guy.
Exactly.
We're always interested if we can do a deal that we look at it and say, how could we not do that deal? That's not the way to get the deal done, and what a shock the deal didn't get done. When you have a team that's at the front of the pack who was of the, well, okay, we'll take Dalvin Cook, on our terms. Or, we made an exploratory phone call to the Raiders about Josh Jacobs, on our terms.
Right.
Well, if we can get this guy for nothing, we will do it, or close to nothing. And that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. And you raise an interesting point about his health.
Yeah, that's the one.
We talked about this last week.
Yeah.
Why are these teams, what are they going to do? They're going to just bring him in and say, oh, yeah, we know you were holding in. We know that was all fake. Go ahead, suit up and play. I mean, is that really what was going on? The fact that anybody was even considering doing it, because what are you going to do? You're going to bring him in and put him on the reserve PUP list and say, well, we gave up all this stuff to get you, but, you'll play when you play. You've got an ankle injury. There's just been this kind of unspoken vibe, and I think it goes back to that brief moment in time, Chris, when the Colts put out the idea that they were going to shift him from the PUP list to the non-football injury list because he had a back injury, supposedly, from working out on his own, and then they wouldn't have to pay him. That was the moment where, even though the Colts didn't come out and say it, the notion was somebody in that organization, and I presume the leaks came from owner Jim Irsay because he was firing the Scud missiles at the time, somebody believed that Taylor was taking the very bad advice of NFLPA President J.C. Tretter, and I'm sorry, J.C., it was bad advice for guys to create leverage by faking injuries because that puts a cloud over everything and it creates suspicion. And I think there's always been that suspicion, Chris, that Jonathan Taylor isn't really injured, could play if he wanted to, that was just his way of holding out without holding out. I said from the moment Irsay started popping off about running back contracts, Jonathan Taylor should not have shown up. He should have held out if he wanted his contract, and maybe that's what this all is. This is a holdout by holding in, by pretending to be injured when he really isn't. He could play if he really wanted to. And now the next step in this process, instead of having him limping around, resisting reps, just leave him on the PUP list, and we'll have 53 guys who are ready to go, and we'll figure it out after the first 4 weeks of the season. That may be what's going on. And I'm not making a character judgment about Jonathan Taylor.
No, not at all.
Yeah, when the president of the union is saying you should do it, it's kind of hard to blame a guy who does it.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
And
sure.
I know he said, well, I can't really say it, but, wink, wink, nod, nod kind of crap. I mean, when you're getting that seal of approval from the guy who runs your union, how can you blame a guy for saying, hey, you know what, this is one of the tools available to him?
No, you're right about that. And as the famous saying goes, I mean, desperate people do desperate things. You do, and we've talked about it a lot. There's just not a lot
not
of
really the saying.
Well,
works.
Well,
desperate times call for desperate measures is the actual saying.
Well,
desperate is the key
okay,
word.
You got it. We're in the right ballpark. I mean, it wasn't a total Simsism there. I was somewhat close, but yeah, I think it's the advice, it's lack of different ways and to attack this. And, probably a little bit of a last-minute panic situation to do this. But, yeah, in my heart of hearts, do I think if Jonathan Taylor got traded and got a contract that he felt was worthy of his services, would his ankle be ready to go the next day? Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would
Toradol me, baby.
That would just be, how it looks. And I'm not trying to accuse him, nor would I even be mad if he is doing this. That's the way it looks, at least from 10,000 feet above. And, it's unfortunate for the Colts and everything here. And what I come back to a lot of the times here, Mike, is, team in transition, new quarterback. We saw Anthony Richardson this last, through the preseason. Incredible talent, but like what we saw this past weekend in that game, it's raw. It's 6 for 18 in preseason game number 3 against some backups and some other guys. So that's where they wish they had Jonathan Taylor, and that's where it's going to hurt them and Anthony Richardson's development a little bit. But I'm interested to see where this goes, Mike. It seems like it's getting ugly.
The term hold-in has become popular in the past few years, ever since the 2020 CBA, when the fines went up to the point where players realized there's another way to apply pressure in an effort to get a contract. I show up, and by agreement with the team, I just don't practice. Before that, hold-in was the term that referred to the guy who was pretending to be injured, who showed up and refused to practice, not with the agreement of the team, but because I've got a hamstring injury, I've got an ankle injury, when he really wasn't injured, and it would play out during the season. Sorry, I can't go this week. I got a quad strain, or whatever the case may be. That's what hold-in used to mean, and that may be what Jonathan Taylor is doing. Now, Chris, something that happened over the weekend that we haven't had a chance to discuss, and Miles Simmons and I tried to determine whether and to what extent there was an impact from this event on Taylor, the Josh Jacobs contract, where he becomes the first guy ever operating under the one-year franchise tender to get more dollars thrown in from the get-go, 10.1 to 11.8 with another $200,000 available in incentives. I think that complicated any effort to trade for Taylor because it resuscitates a depressed market when all of a sudden Josh Jacobs gets to 11.8 instead of 10.1. I think it makes it more difficult for the Dolphins to give Jonathan Taylor a package he feels good about, because what's it going to be compared to?
Yeah.
If your agent cares at all about what it means to his practice going forward, how do you agree to a $10.1 million a year deal? And I don't know what they were talking about, but whatever number you're talking about, it looks worse now after Josh Jacobs turns 10.1 into 11.8.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and first we had Saquon, who got some sprinkles on the top of that contract through the franchise tag. Then you get Josh Jacobs, who gets even more than that, right? And, yes, it kind of messes up the market. It probably messes up Jonathan Taylor's mind a little bit in this situation. And it probably makes him even angrier just because he's going, wait, here's a team that kind of took care of their player. They helped him out. They bridged a gap to a degree. right? But this is I think a far wider gap, right? We're talking about $4.8 million to what? Getting to, 9, 10, 11 million, whatever number that Jonathan Taylor deems necessary. That's not going to happen. Certainly not. And you're right, it does put a little more pressure on the situation, but yeah, I don't know where this goes for Jonathan Taylor. It's limited options here, and I just wonder if is it some point going to be on the field for the Colts, or is it just going to be total exhaustion of the whole subject, and they just trade him for maybe less than he's worth just to get rid of the headache?
I think it all comes down to how fractured the relationship is. And remember, it was Chris Ballard, the GM of the Colts, who told me back in May of 2022, and we weren't talking about Taylor at the time. It was just the dynamic in the NFL of Tyreek Hill getting out of Kansas City and the Chiefs accommodating, Devontae Adams getting out of Green Bay, the Packers accommodating, A.J. Brown out of Tennessee, the Titans accommodating, and he invoked the Mike Tomlin line, we'd rather have volunteers than hostages, and he said, now sometimes you'll play hardball, and I think in the organization, Jim Irsay wanted to play hardball. Jim Irsay, ideally, wanted to keep Jonathan Taylor through the 4 years of his rookie contract, tag him once, maybe tag him twice, at some point say, see you later, we'll go draft somebody else to be our running back. Chris Ballard recognizes that this consternation, this acrimony, it's not sustainable. It doesn't help you build a team that is going to be as successful as possible. When you have a guy that doesn't want to be there, it disrupts the chemistry and the vibe in the locker room. And I think at some point, Ballard won the short-term fight to just let the guy go see what else is out there.
Yeah, right.
And as we suspected from the get-go, he's going to see that what's out there isn't what he wants. So now, after he comes off of the PUP list, if and when he comes off of the PUP list, and he may be traded while still on the PUP list, we'll find out whether or not he's willing to just take what he can get to move on, who's going to step up before the trade deadline, if anyone. And if that doesn't happen, and this is the risk he's taken, Chris, if he doesn't want to play at all this year for the Colts, if he's done, if he's never going to wear a Colts uniform again, how do you get anything close to market value when you played 11 games in 2022, no games in 2023?
Yeah.
I know it worked for Deshaun Watson playing no games in 2021.
Yeah, not the
when
same.
When he got his trade to the...
Right.
But it's not the same.
No.
It's not the same.
No.
And Watson still hasn't been the same. I mean, look, if Watson isn't the guy he was in 2020, and we'll know that by the trade deadline, that becomes a cautionary message to anyone that would trade for Jonathan Taylor. Like, hey, you take a whole year off, and you may never get back on the horse.
No, we argued this, right, with Saquon and Josh Jacobs, saying get out there. Even in those situations, get out there, play. You're not going to sit out the year and get more money the next year. You lose, the fine tuning of your craft. It is another year, even though you're not getting beat up. I don't care. 4.49 goes to 4.495 in that year, or 4.4 or 4.5, right? I mean, you're not getting younger. You're not getting more explosive. So you're missing an opportunity to collect that check and get the money. I mean, ultimately here, I wish they could come to some incentive-based contract, just like we've kind of seen some idea of that with Jacobs and Barkley. Can make it lucrative to where you get him out there and get a fire under his butt once again. Can you find a way to, hey, if you're top 5 rushing in football, you get $1 million. If you're, top 5 rushing TDs, it's another $1 million. I mean, can't we get to something like that, at least to bridge the gap? I would think that's not too crazy here, but maybe Jonathan Taylor doesn't want to deal with that. Maybe the Colts' heels are dug in here on this too, and Jeremy Irsay is not willing to do that right now. I don't know. But I wish there was a remedy for Jonathan Taylor's sake, I guess is just what I'm saying there.
And there may be one hell of a story that we may never hear about what really happened on that bus. Remember that?
Yeah.
That was how this all kind of got started.
Crazy.
Jonathan,
right.
Yeah. Jonathan Taylor reported for camp, and I remember he was one of the guys I was watching. Is he just going to not report? He reported for camp, and everything was fine. And then Jim Irsay starts firing the Scud missiles, taking to Twitter. A few days later, on the bus, and I think some of the reporters were trying to create this kind of loose impression, they're working it all out. And then it was after that we found out that Taylor wanted to be traded. And then Irsay says, we will not trade him. We will not trade him now or in October. But I guess they were going to trade him in August, and they still may trade him in September. And they ultimately may trade him in October. So it's a bad situation for a team that's trying to turn things around and create a positive vibe with a new quarterback.
Right.
And it would have been nice for them to have Jonathan Taylor fully motivated, fully determined, fully compensated, and ready to go, because what a way to take heat off of your rookie quarterback than to have the best running back, arguably, in football, moving the chains and drawing the safeties up to the line of scrimmage so your quarterback can find some guys wide-ass open down the field.
That's right.
Now they're not going to have that.
No.
And I'm still, like, their depth, I wonder what they're going to do at tailback now. Is Zach Moss the answer?
I think they're going to have to ride him a little, and then I would think they're in the process of looking at guys who are on the street that got cut yesterday to go who makes sense and how can we juggle our roster to add another running back to the equation here. That's what I would think. But, yeah, that's what's a little scary here. There's not anything that you look at to go, let's rely on that group, or, hey, this guy, we know we got him, in our back pocket in case Jonathan Taylor, he's dependable. No. It's a group of young guys, unproven. Zach Moss never really worked out in Buffalo, got injured there a little bit. So I'm sure they're scared, And honestly, the last week and just how that Jonathan Taylor not being back and seeing Anthony Richardson on Saturday, I believe that was, right? There was a lot of games this weekend. It made me think differently of the Colts, where the Colts, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit like, hey, maybe they'll surprise some people and be in the mix here in early December. And I feel like over the last week to 10 days, I kind of came to the determination, nah, he's young, he's raw, he's got a ton of talent, but, just as I saw in that preseason game, it's going to take some time. And now you don't have a Jonathan Taylor to lean on officially here. I go, yeah, this is a somewhat of a rebuild, get Anthony Richardson used to the NFL type of year.
And the depth chart does go Zach Moss, Deion Jackson, Evan Hull for now.
Yeah.
For the Indianapolis Colts. We'll see who they can find, whether it's a guy who's available or a guy that they would maybe acquire via trade at some point between now and October 31. Doesn't just have to be week 1. Could be at any point before that window closes. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.